And we are back with part 3 of this week's Shabbat service for Waymaker Messianic Jewish and Christian Center USA. It is January 30th, 2021, and Shabbat 16 of the year 5781. We have just completed the Torah portion this week. Beshalach is the Torah portion. When he let go, he tells the children of Israel um, this tells of Israel's early um, wanderings in the desert. This is when they first leave Egypt, when they first start getting doubt, when things get a little tough, and they're thirsting, and then they're hungry. God always came through for them, and if anyone saw the miracles of God, it was this generation. Yet, as we're going to see as we move on, spoiler alert, this is the generation that did not make it to the promised land because of their disbelief. And really, we need to look at this as a lesson to trust Adonai, our God, with all of our heart and soul, because he does know what is going on in our world, in our lifetime. He is on the throne. He is there, and we need to lean into him um, for all that, for all of our needs as well. And he hears us. He is, our cries to Adonai do not fall on deaf ears, not to his children. He is a wonderful Father. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords, and he does not forsake either any one of us. He does hear us when we call out to him. And if you have that relationship with God, you know that to be so. Um, Times may seem dark, but to just be in the Lord's presence and to feel the peace that passes all understanding, you know that you are in his Shekinah glory, and you're enveloped by nothing but love that comes uh, over you. And no matter what's going on, he is here for us. So to talk about these early days of B'nai Israel in the desert, um, we see the immediately the Red Sea is parted for B'nai Israel um, to actually travel on dry ground. I mean, to pull the sea back on either side, to the left, to the right, and they walked straight onto dry land. Everything they took, everything that they brought out with them from Egypt, their whole families. They all, not one was left behind. But Pharaoh and his army came plotting after them. They wanted to bring them back. They wanted to either kill them or bring them back into captivity, and God would not have any of that. So once the last Israelite was across the water, he brought the winds back, and he brought the sea on top of Pharaoh and his army, and that was the end. Moses told them, "You will not see these people anymore," and well, they did not. So we have water from a rock. B'nai Israel thirsts for water. They're complaining to Moses. They demand it from him, and he basically rebukes them and tells them, you're testing Adonai. But Adonai has heard, and he's going to give you water, okay? Um, so he actually does, make sure that they are not thirsty. They are given water. He throws that tree into into the body of water, and it becomes sweet. He strikes a rock at Horeb, and water comes out of the rock. So again, God does provide for his people. Um, Also remember, the promise that was made to Joseph, and when the children of Israel left Egypt, they did not leave Joseph's bones behind. Manna from heaven and quail, that is actually rained from heaven, and the manna from heaven came every morning, and they were to gather according to their household for 6 days. And on the sixth day, there was double the portion that God gave for them because absolutely they were not allowed to be out and about and thinking they were going to get it on the seventh day because God told them He was not going to rain any manna from heaven on the seventh day, period. So there were some that tested it and they went out to see if there was anything. And of course, there wasn't any. The other thing, they were not supposed to save it from day to day, only on that sixth day. And if they did, worms were growing out, and of course, this this you know this made Moses a little annoyed with them because they weren't listening. They were just testing and to see how far they could push, and well, they found out. Then at the very end of this week's Torah, we have the attack from Amalek and how God prevailed. And when Moses took the rod of God, the staff of God, and his hands were held up to give the command, the children of Israel, the army of Israel actually prevailed. When he got tired and let his hand down, then the Amalekites were winning. So what uh, they ended up, Aaron and Hur ended up doing was propping Moses' hand up so it stayed up. So Joshua and the army of Israel could actually defeat the Amalekites. Um, so that's how we ended this Torah portion. And we're going to continue on with the half Torah. And this week's half Torah is Judges chapter 4, verse 4 to chapter 5, verse 31. Now, just to let you know, the next leader that's going to come about after Moses, it is actually Adonai chose Joshua. And after Joshua, uh, they end up, B'nai Israel end up having judges to rule them or to lead them. They're given instruction by God, and they judge B'nai Israel. So we are actually going to be talking about Deborah in which is a wonderful story with Deborah. She was a female judge actually, and a very very powerful judge and ruler of Israel. So we're going to start with Judges chapter 4, verse 4, and we will end at the very end of chapter 5, which is Deborah's song, and so we will do the whole thing. Now Deborah, a woman who was a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and B'nai Israel came up to her for judgment. Now she sent and summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali, and said to him, Hasn't Adonai, God of Israel, commanded, Go march to Mount Tabor and take with you 10,000 men of the sons of Naphtali and of the sons of Zebulun? Then at the Kishon torrent I will draw out to you Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will give him into your hand. But Barak said to her, If you are going with me, then I will go. But if you aren't going with me, I won't go. Surely I will go with you, she said. However, no honor will be yours on the way that you are about to go, for Adonai will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Then Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali together to Kadesh, and 10,000 men marched up after him, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite had separated himself from the Kenites, from the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far as the oak in Zananim, which is near Kadesh. They told Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. So Sisera ordered all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the troops that were with him from Harosheth Goim to the Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day in which Adonai will deliver Sisera into your hand. Has Adonai not gone out before you?" So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men, followed him. Adonai threw Sisera and all his chariots and all his army into confusion before Barak with the edge of the sword. Then Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim. The whole army of Sisera fell by the sword, not one was left. Meanwhile, Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between King Jabin of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. So Yael, that's it's pronounced also Jael. So Yael, Yael, went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me. Don't be afraid." So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and made him drink some and covered him. Then he said to her, "Stand at the entrance of the tent, and if anyone comes and asks you, saying, 'Is there a man here?' then you will say, 'There's no one.'" Then Yael, Heber's wife, took a tent pin and got a hammer in her hand, approached him stealthily, and drove the pin into his temple until it pierced through into the ground, for he was exhausted and in deep sleep, so he died. Now, behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Yael came out to meet him and said to him, "Come, I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he entered with her, and behold, Sisera was lying dead with a tent pin in his temple. So on that day God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before Bani Israel. The hand of Bani Israel pressed hard on King Jabin of Canaan until they had cut off King Jabin of Canaan. So here's another incident of, of Bani Israel needing God to fight their battles, and He certainly did. He caused confusion in the tent, in the in the camp for Sisera. Deborah had to encourage Barak to follow Adonai's command, though. She was instrumental in getting him moving to do what God wanted him to do to defeat these people. Um, Deborah's song is chapter 5. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, "When leaders take the lead in Israel, when people freely offer themselves, bless Adonai. Listen, O kings, give ear, O rulers, to Adonai I will sing." This sounds like, the song of Moses and Miriam, and this kind of mirrors what was going on between Amal, when we look at Moses and all that Adonai did for Bnei Israel, as well as fighting their battles. And here we are mirroring this in the Haftorah as well. So I'm going to continue this song, Deborah's song. "I will sing praise to Adonai, the God of Israel. Adonai, when you came out from Seir, when you marched from Edom's field, the earth trembled. The heavens also dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before Adonai, this Sinai at the presence of Adonai, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Yael, the highways were deserted. Travelers walked by crooked paths. Villages were deserted in Israel, deserted until I, Deborah, arose. A mother in Israel arose. They chose new gods. Then war was in the gates. No shield or spear was seen among 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's rulers who offer themselves freely among the people. Bless Adonai. Riders on white donkeys, sitting on saddle blankets, traveling on the roads, sing louder than the sound of archers at the watering places. There let them rehearse the righteous acts of Adonai, the righteous deeds for his villages in Israel. Then the people of Adonai went down to the gates. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son Abinoam. Then a remnant of nobles came down. Adonai's people came down to me with the mighty ones. Those with root in Amalek are from Ephraim, following you. Benjamin with your peoples from Machir came down rulers, and from Zebulun wielding the marshal's staff. Issachar's chiefs were with Deborah. Issachar was with Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels. Among the divisions of Reuben there were great resolves of heart. Why did you say, why did you stay in the sheepfolds to hear the piping for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben there was much searching of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why did he stay by the ships? Asher sat in the seacoast, dwelling by its docks. Zebulun is a people who jeopardized their lives to death, and Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. The kings came, they fought, and the kings of Canaan fought at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo, but they took no spoil of silver. From heaven the stars fought in their courses, they fought Sisera. The Kishon torrent swept them away, that ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. O my soul, march on with strength. Then the horse's hoofs beat from the dashing of his mighty steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of Adonai, utterly curse its inhabitants, for they came not to the aid of Adonai, to the aid of Adonai among the mighty. Blessed above women is Yael, the wife of Heber the Canaanite. Above women in the tent is she blessed. Water he asked, milk she gave him. In a lordly bowl she brought him butter. Her hand reached for the tent pin, her right hand to the workman's hammer, and with the hammer she struck Sisera. She smashed his head. Yet, yes, she crushed and pierced his temple. At her feet he collapsed, he fell, he lay. Between her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell dead. Through the window Sisera's mother looked out through the lattice and lamented shrilly. Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the wheels of his chariots tarry? The wisest of her princesses answer her. Yes, she repeats the words to herself. Are they not finding dividing the spoil, a maiden, maidens for every warrior? To Sisera, a spoil of dyed garments, a spoil of dyed garments of embroidery, double dyed garments of embroidery for the necks of every spoiler. So let all your enemies perish, Adonai, but may those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might. Then the land had peace for 40 years. So there are parallels here. Here we have a woman who is a leader, Deborah. Um, and when we look at the parallels between the Torah, how God had came through for Israel time and time again to lead them to victory. And yes, women are called by God to lead, and God has a right to choose who He calls. Um, and we are in a time where men, your old men will, and your young men will dream dreams. Your There'll be children, there'll be women called. We are living in such a time that it is so important to get the gospel out. And anyone that has a heart for God, God knows your heart, and God will raise you up to do evangelical work, to do His work for His glory, not for ours. So if you are called, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, in these days that we live, there's a great harvest about ready to happen, because there's a lot of souls unsaved, people who think that they're going to heaven, and we're going to get into that with the altar call and kind of clear out all the misnomers and the false beliefs, that everybody goes to heaven, because that is not true, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit in actually the second part of Shabbat service with the altar call. So in the Haftorah, we have Deborah, who is a very strong leader. She's a judge. She's a prophetess, but she's also a judge for Israel, and she's the one who gets Barak to move. He's kind of not listening to what Adonai's telling him to do, and she's really kind of telling him, "Look, you need to get moving here. This is what you're called to do. And he didn't want to go unless she went with him. She was a pretty strong woman, and she said, I will go with you. But you're not going to get credit for this. This credit is going to go to a woman because you didn't stand up when Adonai called you, and I'm having to prod you, in other words. So Adonai is prodding me to prod you, and this is something you have to do. Um, so we can have the victory. And they went forward, and God caused confusion in the enemy camp, which we will see time and time again that God will do. And I believe that that is being done today too. God does work for us. We need to give God the glory. So a quick recap of the Torah. Um, B'nai Israel departs Egypt. Pharaoh chases after them. God saves them, splits the Red Sea so they can walk through dry land. Moses and Miriam and the children of Israel sing a praise of gratitude to God. As time goes on, they complain, they murmur. They were thirsty, they were hungry. Bitter waters were turned sweet. Water came from a rock. Manna was brought down from heaven, quails. Um, and then the Amalekites were also defeated. That was our Torah portion. And then when we're talking about the Haftorah, describes the fall of the Canaanite general Sisera and his armies who were swept away by the Kishon River. So kind of there's a parallel there. The Red Sea, Pharaoh and his armies were swept away by the Red Sea, and here Sisera's armies were swept away by the Kishon River, and Deborah ensued the song of thanks as well. So there was praise to Adonai there. So it parallels the stories of the drowning of the Egyptian forces in the Red Sea and the subsequent songs by Moses and Miriam. Deborah the prophetess was the leader and judge of the Israelites at a very difficult time. The Israelites were being persecuted by King Jabin of Canaan and his general Sisera. Deborah summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, and told him, God told you to gather 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and Zebulun and go. Um, and so, and said that he will give Jabin's army into his hands. So at Barak's request, Deborah accompanied him, and together they went on a fence, and actually they were victorious. So that is the end of the Torah and the half Torah portion and this segment of Shabbat service. Um, Father God, we thank you. We thank you for your hand in our life. When we think, we can see from history how when things look very bleak and very that there's defeat, there isn't defeat because all we need to do is lean into you. You've never let your people down. You are on the throne, and we are so glad that you are. You're in control of everything. We love you, Father God. Uh, we love you. We worship you. We adore you. In the mighty name of Yeshua, Jesus, Amen and Amen. And take a quick break, and we're going to come back with the second segment of Shabbat services. This will actually be part 4 on the uploaded um, audio video, but we will be beginning with opening up the second segment and then doing the Brit Kadashah and altar call and then closing up Shabbat service for this week. So take a break and come back in a little bit.